Hey everyone, and welcome. I am Morgan Giss MacDonald, founder CEO of Paper Raven Books, and I have with us today super special guests, two guests who have co-written book two of a series that we're going to be talking about today. Now, this series is called Interface and is already an award-winning series. In fact, it was just recently awarded by the American Book Fest the Science Fiction Post-Apocalyptic Award for book one, Connection, and book two, Crow City, is coming out hot off the presses. And I have with us the two collaborative authors here to talk more about Interface the series, as well as book two, Crow City. And the collaborative pen name is R.K. Hillhouse. And the authors are Ron Haycock and Dr. Karen Walasek. So, Ron, Karen, thank you so much for being here with me today to talk about Interface.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
What I love about books like yours, because you both are futuristic thinkers, you have the ability both to think about technology as well as ecology and sustainability, and you really kind of live off the land. So you hold both of these kind of in your minds and you live it. And what's cool about a series like this is that when you first start writing a post-apocalyptic series, it seems kind of, oh, that couldn't, that maybe could happen in the future. But then as time marches on, you start to realize, holy moly, the themes that you're talking about in Interface are starting to come true. And some of the themes that you introduce in Interface are about basically technology, right? And what happens when the world really starts to break down. Can you all walk us through like what's happening in the world that you created in Interface?
Well, in the first book, it talks about it in a preface uh, that there has been a collapse. There was, between technology collapse, soil collapse, climate collapse, and a virus basically that wipes out a good deal of the population of the planet. And then about 100 years later is when our story takes place, and there is a place, a city, where the interface is still being used for people to manipulate their environment. And then there are a lot of people that are outside the city, and um, the story gives you a view into that kind of life, as well as what it would have been like to live outside of it. And it focuses around a character named Emerson Lloyd, whose parents were killed, and he goes to live with his grandfather out in the rural woods. And there's not a lot of people. So he's pretty much homesteading out in the wilderness with his grandfather, and he grows up with him. And after his grandfather dies, he goes back into the city to become a pilot, which has been his dream. And he meets with all of the disillusionment of what it is really like to live in that place. His grandfather hated it and tried to warn him against it, but like most young people, he had to see it for himself.
The nice thing about the Emerson character is he's really an outsider in viewing into this technology. The technology is very romantic for him, but because of his skill set of being outside of it, his ability to think for himself is very strong. And that compares with some of what's going on with these other characters who've had this interface, basically a computerized version of like social media, maybe that gets influences our thinking. So he's sort of an outsider, so who can mirror some of the issues with it.
Yeah, he's a viewpoint. He's a viewpoint that shows you what it's really like. As a writer's mechanism, we use him as a viewpoint to show what non-indoctrinated people would see. And he becomes close with some of the people who are upper class people in this city, elites, so to speak, people that have more control over their interface. than the rank and file. They're called the middles. And they have a child, and he escapes, and he gets her out of there, and then her father
Okay, don't tell.
goes crazy trying to get him back. Well, that's basically how the first story is. They're running. They're trying to get away from this person. And so we have climate change that's making it difficult, massive tornadoes, rainstorms that create floods. A little bit of a nod to Hundred Years of Solitude, because there's that whole section in there where it rains for what is it, years in that. So yeah, there's an inland sea that they get trapped in, and it just goes on, and then finally make their way to the west coast and create like a little place to live.
And that's where book two ends up comes in. But it's kind of interesting, it sounds like it's almost anti-technology, but in a lot of respects, Emerson, because of his strength of character, because he hasn't been weakened by all those other influences, he has the ability to really use the technology for what it's good for. So it's almost from Emerson's perspective, it's a very positive pro look at technology and all the cool things we can do with it, and which he utilizes to help the people that he's working with. So it's not cut and dry. It's very, very gray areas of what could possibly be.
So when we pick up in book 2, you're introducing us to Crow City. What's unique about Crow City?
Well, how they're introduced to Crow City is by a character who arrives. She's her name is Saw, and she tells them that basically there's an earthquake coming. That you can tell the birds, the land, the sky, everything has told her that there's going to be a massive earthquake, and they're living on the coast, and that's really not a great idea, and they should leave. And not only that, but she's leaving. And they follow because there starts to be an earthquake. And she brings them back to Crow City. Crow City is basically a village of non-technological folks who have vowed to not use the old technologies, and so they're trying to avoid that.
So that the conflict is like between looking at the living world around us and gaining our knowledge from there, or working with the technology, and in the balance between the two. So I mean, because the Crow City isn't a utopia. There's things going on there that's not quite.
There are always problems.
Yeah, and so.
And people, because this is a post-civilization kind of story, there are people who have gravitated to Crow City. The people in Crow City are not necessarily wanting to welcome, but they don't want to exclude them. But I mean, so there's all this political nonsense that begins to happen. And then don't forget Quinn's father, Lord, he's Boston Quinn is a maniac, and he's getting crazier. There's a pressure in this novel that the food sources are pretty much gone. And that if you don't learn how to farm and you don't learn how to grow food in this new environment, you won't survive. Well, the people in the city are using a fungus-based replication food, right? And it has, the only reason it has a flavor is because they're implanted with this interface that gives their brain the idea that that's what it tastes like. Stuff doesn't taste like anything. It's disgusting. And people that have eaten real food can't eat it. Like Emerson's attitude is it just makes him sick. He can't eat that food at all. And this is having an effect on people's cognition, on their mental state, on their ability to think, because a lot of what the elites especially are doing is they're eating old food. They're eating frozen McDonald's hamburgers that have been frozen for 100 years. They're eating, and I described that as well, which gives you a really clear idea of what eating that food now is going to do to you. And so Boston Quinn has kind of gone insane, and he's trying to get his daughter back because he believes that she is his heir and that he will become the king of the world if I know people. So again, Crow City was written in the, like 2023. So things that were occurring in 2023 are kind of embedded in that respect.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it becomes rather violent.
Yeah. And you, I mean, the two of you, when you write collectively, you don't shy away from the ambiguity, right? There are things that are good about technology, but technology causes a collapse, and technology is part of what controls us. But like Karen just said, people like Emerson can learn to use it, right? And also you have the series is really grounded in kind of the land, learning to, you said homesteading, living off the land, the ecology, the climate, paying attention to the birds, becomes these sorts of things become important. You'll also address areas of learning to be human again. And I'm wondering, can you give us a little insight into what does it look like for some of these characters to rediscover like their embodiment, as humans?
Well, that's a really good question. I think a lot of that has to come through, it has to come through experience. We had to learn to personally become much more physically embodied to be able to write about people that recognize that their bodies are an extension of their consciousness, or that maybe that consciousness and that body can't be separated. Well, we have a real big problem with disconnection in this world. And it's a control factor, really. It's not a conspiracy theory. People are separated and they have no power when they're separated. And so an important part of regaining personal empowerment is to recognize that people are connected. And so it doesn't really start to come up until book 3, but there's an ancestral aspect of this that comes through this character, Sa, because she and a lot of the people in Crow City follow a religion called the religion of the mother. And for them, the mother is not just some invisible thing that they pray to. They actually interact with this being that takes on the form of their mother. And they communicate with the mother, and that gives them the ability to also communicate with the memories, which are embedded in the crystalline nature of our planet. So all of that memory of everything that's happened is there and accessible to people that are adept in this spiritual, I don't want to call it a religion, I call it a religion, but it's not really a religion because it's not organized in any way. It's that people recognize this and they learn to do this if they're talented in that respect. Sa is one of those masters in this, or becoming a master in this. And so what the story is trying to say is that there's another way to do what the interface does. And it's not that Sa is against the interface. She actually gets one because she wants to know more about it. But the idea is that this will transition into a non-technology ability. So that's massively ambiguous, really.
Well, it goes back to why we, call ourselves Parkway Hillhouse, Ron, Aaron, and then Hillhouse is the overall homestead. And we just recently moved, so we've moved to a new set of mountains. And hills, but it's still Hillhouse, and we still brought some of our own characters, our horses and sheep and cows. When you spend time with animals whether they're domesticated or whether they're in the wild world, we realize they're talking to us. And they're communicating to us. We think of animals as being dumb animals. Right.
Well, tell some stories about animal communication. There's some great things that have happened to us. We moved into this house, and all of a sudden we started hearing birds
I mean, the words were really loud.
Birds in the house. Where are these birds? And then suddenly there's a bird in the house flying around. And Karen went up to it and it just sat there, let her pick it up and take it outside.
So they were chimney swifts. Well, we found out that chimney swifts will, because we didn't close the flue. Come springtime, you have to close the flue in this house, we learned, because otherwise, once in a while, you'll get a chimney swift in the house. And so we began realizing that the adult chimney swifts, if they found themselves in the house, which is sort of like wait there for a person to come and get them and let them out. And apparently this must have happened before because chimney swifts keep coming back to the same location. I have a friend who's got a chimney swift that have been coming back to her chimney for 17 years. So it's really interesting. So what, but then the babies, there was a couple of babies that got in the house. As soon as I went to go get them, they like screamed. And they're like, so there was learning taking place with these animals.
Certain amount of epigenetic memory, we think, that swifts that come to our chimney are used to people. They live with it. I mean, they were here for what, 3 months?
And then one day they were gone.
Oh, it got cold.
It got cold.
The really funny thing is that we had a cold snap. Temperature went down in the 50s at night. Second day, they were gone. And we don't know if they were gone because it was time for them to migrate or that chimney swifts know you're going to light a fire in that fireplace and they need to get out of there because it got cold. It's real interesting. So in the books, a lot of this animal, interspecies communication is illustrated by the character in the first book of Mule, who's an oversized house cat about the size of a mastiff. And in the second book, it's there's a melanistic fox that shows up and has mates with this dog type animal because dogs are mainly extinct in this post-apocalyptic.
The mule shows up.
Mule is there for half of it.
For a little bit. But anyway, but they
interact and Mule brings them food. That hunts for them. There's no actual communication. There's just an understanding and an interrelationship between these wild animals and these people. Whereas there's no pets in the city.
But even if are living on our homestead and are dealing with all our animals and the weird interactions with the chimney swifts and whatever, don't specifically make it into books. They make it in different ways, because it's already there. The books I kind of feel like are like the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg is the book, and all the experiences that we have kind of like feed into it, which is why it's RK Hillhouse, because Ron can't claim, even if he does a lot of the typing at the computer with a lot of this stuff, especially this next book, he can't claim it's all his because it's part of all of us interacting and creating this book.
If you want to know another aspect of that, the more that we learn, and Karen and I have been in college for a long time, so we get a lot of the specifics of this particular occurrence. Name a famous book. I'll almost guarantee that there was a woman that had something to do with that famous book that is not mentioned. Nobody even knows about it. Probably doesn't know her name, doesn't know she exists, and didn't think that she had anything to do with it. People like Charles Darwin, Albert Einstein. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I recognize that there was no way that I would have ever written a book like this if I hadn't been in partnership with this person for 50 years. And so even though Karen didn't write, well, she did edit some of it because there were things that were wrong, things that needed to be fixed. But for the most part, most of the ideas, the sustainability concepts are things that Karen and I worked out in conversation together. They're not my ideas, they're our ideas. I started going to school because I didn't know what else to do with myself in 2008. I was disabled and there was nothing to do. So I went back to school. I figured, maybe I'll do some more stuff in computers, right? When I get to college and they say, what do you really want? I'd like to write a novel. I came home and told Karen, I'm gonna write a novel, and she was like, okay, and then you go back to work, right? But I didn't.
Still writing.
Still writing, still writing. Yep.
I do love your collaborative writing, that you've created a real pen name that does represent both of you in RK Hillhouse. And I think to your point, it's something that I would just acknowledge or affirm the fact that I think all of us who write realize that there's usually at least one other significant person who is behind the scenes with us through every idea really that comes onto that page. So I love it.
Acknowledgements are very, very, very important. If you can't say that the person wrote it with you, if you don't want to get into that, I mean, it's a weird gray area. We didn't really write it together. I wrote, Karen is.
Well, then I would go back. It's like in the first book I wrote the whole birthing situation and added stuff in there. And it's like when I was in,
I've been to births, but I never gave birth. So
yeah. And then a lot of my degree in sustainability education was focused around matriarchal studies, mother studies, and mother-centric feminism kind of thing, and indigenous studies. And so a lot of this whole colonial idea of listening to birds and all that comes from indigenous peoples. And I also researched my own lineage, going back to although my grandparents were rural peasants who lived off the land and shepherds. And so I went to Poland and spent some time at shepherds and like sort of embraced my own culture. And so when Ron says these ideas, I mean, there would be no Saw Parrot without that part of my research, and so a lot of returning to the land and returning to how do we live with and without this technology. What's going to happen when we get little snippets of it when the global trade gets disrupted, right? Because we're totally dependent on global trade. And what does localization look like if the infrastructure for localization isn't there? And so in the second book, we got little pockets of different kinds of ways people are dealing with it. And they're all pretty much traumatized and broken in ways that our society today is broken.
There's a whole group of people in both the first, it's more in the second book than the first book, that were so against technology that they gathered up anything that was even mildly associated with electronic technology, put it in a big pile and burned it. And they created like a religion out of this. And what that burning that did is create a monstrous amount of toxic waste. And since they were all so attached to this process, they lived around it. That was a high, that was an important thing. If you could live next to that pile of burning toxic nonsense, that made you a real, important person. So, there are going to be people that blame technology for everything. And I wanted to illustrate that because it sets up a real problem with people that need technology or technologies that work. And again, we're seeing this in our current administration. We're eliminating things that they don't have any idea why they're eliminating them. They're just eliminating. And they have far-reaching consequences to eliminate some of this stuff. So, yeah, it imitates that as well.
So the world that you have created with Interface, I think, is a very thought-provoking world because we see so much of what's happening in with the Interface world also happening in our own world, right? I mean, the climate changing, the technology going from something that's helpful to something that's controlling, the potential need to go back to living on the land, to reconnecting with ourselves and each other and animals and nature. All of these themes, we hear sort of echoed around our culture now. And you've created some really compelling characters. We've mentioned Emerson here, as a bit of an outsider who we can really interact with this world through his eyes. What is Emerson's big challenge in book two in Crow City?
Big,
Please. Gotta
it's
let
trying to find a place. They're looking for home. And it's interesting thing is that Brian brought this up in the first when we were doing the first book, and he read it over and he says it's kind of like it's like a travel story. It's like it's like a road trip. They're moving through this thing, and and that's what they're doing. They're looking for home, and home is in book two. They think maybe a home that exists already might be a home they can become part of, and they become entrenched in it. They build a life. They try to help the people that are living in it, but it doesn't turn out, and they have to move. And then there are other places that they try that don't work out. So there's a lot of they're in the desert. They're looking for home. This is a very old story. you know, and they encounter other people that are also looking for home. But some of them band with them, and some of them split off, and some of them have ulterior motives, and some of them are hurtful, but some of them are helpful, some of them are cyborgs. There's more technology that comes up that ask the question, if you have a catastrophic health issue, you might really want a computer and a robot that can actually do this surgery, even if you can't remember how to do it. And there's a lot of that, forgetting how to deal with these technologies. But we still got them, and we're going to use them until they completely fall apart, because what else are we going to? That's what's going to happen.
Emerson also needs to let go of authority. It's like he's kind of, he's like
He was raised by Chandler, and Chandler is a very authoritarian person.
but I was just thinking his own authority. He kind of got pushed into this leadership role, and there was a little more of an egalitarian push back against this. And at one point he has to let go.
He's the only man. I didn't realize that I'd written it, but his entire group is he's a man, then there's three women, and now there's four, and a cyborg. So, and he has a daughter.
So the guy can't be the one who's in control all the time, right?
It just doesn't work.
So there's that arc.
That's right. If you're here, you're listening to this and you're thinking, gosh, Ron and Karen have written my kind of book, right? It's very near future feeling, issues of climate and ecology and civilization and technology and home and community and being a human, right? Like these are the
Yeah.
themes that are running through. We have these very strong characters. We have Emerson, who is really trying to figure out what it means to be a man, right? To be his own man, right? And trying to find his way in the world, and who's going to be his ally, and who is hunting him, We've got High Lord Boston Quinn, on the hunt, and it's action packed and it makes you think. This is the book for you. If you're here and you're thinking, I'm kind of digging this conversation, good news is book one is already out. It's an award-winning book. You can grab Interface Connection right now. And book two is launching. And so we've got a special promotion going on for book two, Crow City. And book three is hot on its heels. It's going to be a trilogy. It's going to be an action-packed trilogy that'll be finished soon. So you can safely go ahead and dive in, read book one, catch up on book two, and anticipate that third book coming out really soon. So, Interface, it's a book that will leave you thinking and definitely turning the pages. So, we invite you guys to go ahead and check it out. Go to paperravenbooks.com/Crow City for book two or /connection for book one. And you can find it on Amazon, ebook, physical book, however you prefer to read your books. And yeah, we would encourage you to go ahead and check that out. Share it with a friend who loves this kind of post-apocalyptic kind of literature and these thought experiments and these kinds of survivalist characters. And Karen, Ron, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing. Any last words for your readers, for people who are diving into either book two and they've already read book one, or maybe they're just now coming to Interface? What would you say to your readers?
The thing about the book, I mean, we've been talking all about the sort of what's underneath the book, more so than maybe the characters and everything. The thing about the book is not preaching. It unfolds in a story, and the character and the story is there. Nobody likes to be preached at. So we leave lots of room for you to engage and feel good about the story wherever you land in feeling where our future is headed. At the end, it's fun and it's hopeful, right? I mean, that's
And
the story.
it's got action, it's hopeful. I tried to make sure there was some humor in it. There's definitely some tragedy. Yeah, let's get it on Netflix. It was really written to be very cinematic, so it's very visual.
Amazing. Thank you both for being here. Thank you for pulling all of your years of wisdom and experience and education. You've both been through more postgraduate education about all of these themes, and then pulling it into a compelling story with deep characters who are living through very ambiguous times, right? I think there's a lot of connection for all of us to be had in the Interface series. So thank you for pulling it all together and creating this beautiful series with us, for us. And we encourage everyone, dive in, book two, Crow City. Third book's on the way, so make sure to get all caught up.
And thank you for creating Paper Raven. These books would not have been published without.
Thank you. It's been a true honor. Yes, thank you. Y'all have a lovely rest of your day. Go read Interface, and we will catch you guys next time. Bye, everybody.